As September of 2007 rolled around, the light in Saudi Arabia changed unconventionally, exposing some of the troops, but also giving them the possibility to enclose some of the undead enemies. In Europe, the armies were being pushed west, the distance between the front and Belarus not as far as it once was. The attempt to link the Chinese and Turkish line had failed, as flanking zombies had broken through. But as they were headed north to join the other zombies, an opportunity might present itself to still establish a link. The battles around Sevastopol were chaos. Where the humans still held the city a couple of months back, they had lost it in previous weeks and were being driven north. Belarus also got thrown into the war once more, as people urged to increase the pressure on the zombies while they still could. Over the course of weeks, the areas of zombies decreased and increased, bouncing back to a bigger size after the humans enjoyed a few victories here and there. In Russia, it went so bad that they were even pushed close to Finland again. And in China, the division that headed west to link with the Turkish line were threatened to break by zombies marching south. A repetition occurred with the flanking zombies behind the Ukrainian line as well. The fact that this happened a second time angered a lot of civilians. They were of the opinion that army leaders should use previous experience to prevent similar situations. Then at the end of November, the Turkish and Chinese line were finally connected. This was overshadowed in Europe by a scandal as the British government set up an attitude where they put themselves above some other countries. The lack of Britain's involvement in the war in Africa caused for great critique from civilians from other European countries. And so with pressure put on the flanking horde in the Ukraine once again, history repeated itself as the armies moved towards Sevastopol. And then 2008 showed its face, a year where people demanded a big change regarding the war against the zombies. Many shouted for more nuclear bombs to drop, and others for a change in leadership. Russia was criticized by many on the lack of ability to hold the zombies in the north, and China had to endure some criticism as well, as indeed the zombies that headed south towards the coast cut off the link between the Chinese and the Turkish. In America, the focus shifted temporarily inward as this year's elections could mean a huge change. John McCain and Barack Obama had launched their campaigns across the country, hoping to win the souls of many. If Obama could win, this meant America would have its first ever black president. During his campaign, Obama too, of course, took the subject of the zombies in Europe serious. He could sense that people were getting tired of the war. Therefore, his slogan during the campaign answered what was on everyone's mind. Can we destroy the zombie threat once and for all?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Halfway through February, the north side could finally start pushing again, after having received reinforcements from more European countries. The breaking of the Chinese line, however, got pulled further apart, with little reinforcements coming from the west. Like Montenegro a few months before, more countries like Kosovo gained their independence. Some thought that this was so that it was easier to barricade themselves off from the horde if the landmass itself was smaller, while others purely found that to be fear talking. And so the tug of war continued in Europe, as did it around the Turkish line. Both the Turkish and the Saudi Arabians managed to push north, but only time would tell when they would be halted once again. With the nukes that had been dropped over time, the population of zombies had diminished greatly. Though there were still multiple millions, they were not that many that they could withstand evenly at all fronts. If the horde shifted to one side, the other side, like in Europe, could advance, and this time they advanced greatly. All the while, of course, while more nukes were being dropped. The battlefields had turned into scorching wastelands. The Chinese and Turkish line had been broken up again, but only temporarily. There were not enough units stationed around this area to keep it secured. As regular infantry did seem to have trouble dealing with the massive amount of zombies, specialized hits and traps might be more successful, and so Hu Jintao started a training program for the specialized units purely to deal with the zombie enemy. After a scandal in France resulted in Sarkozy stepping down, the presidential election favored Ségolène Royal, who began her presidential career with executive reforms, strengthening her position more tightly than her predecessor Sarkozy. Over the months, Russia had regrouped again and joined fellow European and Asian countrymen down south, which was especially successful on the eastern side. Halfway through 2008, it became clear that a push from the Ukraine's position was nearly impossible, but the North did give to the overwhelming human force. The main front with the Chinese had been relinked on the eastern side, but the Americans were not able to go through the wall of undead to become one again to strengthen the line. Another nuke signaled the push for the Europeans in Russia. By the end of June, the death toll for the zombies lay at 51 million. Many countries had lost nearly 1 million soldiers throughout, but China stood at an ultimate low with over 3.5 million dead. But their deaths were paid back in blood, with more nukes being dropped. The push from the north actually went so well that a few Dutch divisions spearheaded south to hopefully cut the zombies off at the water. But like so many spearhead attempts before, this one got cut off at the last minute. In the meantime, Australia was playing it safe, maybe a little too safe. Though other countries like Canada and the UK were late to the battle, they paid their share in blood. But Australia had not sent a single man into battle yet. Instead, they focused on producing and shipping military equipment for land leases with other nations. The Dutch had reached the water, and were finally able to cut off the zombies on the east and west. Now that they were headed towards the southwest, other countries dropped not one, not two, but 3 nuclear bombs in its wake. The Chinese had reinforced the southern shores and were now trying to advance north. The push west by the Dutch went real smooth for a long while, and when they reached undead resistance, some of the units just turned around to secure the bypassed lands. As they secured areas around the coast, more units of other countries headed south as well as west to push the zombie horde into 2 directions. Of course, nuclear bombs were dropped ahead of their approach. China closed in from the east as well, and the area that was zombie infested became smaller and smaller. The push went swell on almost all sides. But this could only last for so long, as the amount of zombies were still multiple millions, and the smaller the area, the more difficult it would be to break through unless more nukes were used. In Europe, the Russians finally managed to push south, bypassing the Ukrainian border towards the mountains. Zombies that were overrun and surrounded by the stampeding forces were put down hard. The Turkish front was the only side that had trouble pushing north. With more and more undead being forced to their position, it became very clustered. And then, at the end of September, the mountains of the Russian border region had finally been reached, returning Russia's territory to its former self. And for the next few days, things continued in its usual manner. Nuclear bombs were dropped all over the place, and the soldiers coming from the north made slow, steady progress, while of course, more bombs were dropped by various countries. In America, Barack Obama pulled off an overwhelming victory, promising the citizens of the United States much needed change within the country itself and also over in Europe. A pocket of zombies that was bypassed in the mountainous regions of Russia could not be dealt with, and thus they were able to push upward along the coast again. The Scandinavian countries mainly focused on air production to support all other countries from the skies above. And thus at the end of November, things took a turn again as the human armies lost control of the line and were pushed back at the left flank. The same happened in the east, and in a matter of days the line had fallen all the way back to Ukrainian soil almost. The line just kept on shifting and shifting, sometimes favoring the zombies and sometimes favoring the humans. It seemed like a never-ending cycle. Many countries, including Greece, focused on research expansion capabilities. Some believed this was so that more countries could achieve nuclear weaponry. Others still simply stood by the continuous air production to keep constant pressure on the undead walkers. Obama set forth to increase production of resources that were required for armor and vehicles. This created job opportunities in the US as well. The Russian line had been pushed past Sevastopol again, getting dangerously close to unleash another war with the Ukraine. And in Turkey, the familiar sight of the zombies pushing land inward repeated itself. All the progress that was made over the past few months was wiped clean in a matter of days. Chances were high that the humans could push back again at a certain point with reinforcements. But would the same cycle repeat a third time? This suddenly made something very frightening apparent to the people of Earth. Though the zombies were not strong enough to take over the Earth anymore, the human armies might not be strong enough to kill the zombies off. Obama promised change, so only time would tell if he could keep that promise.